Do you think music is a technology?
Music is a medium. I mean, it's like, is English a technology? Is language a technology? It's like an innovation that humans made up to exchange emotional feelings or whatever with each other.
Yeah. I always ask those questions on like, is culture a technology? Is music a technology? I believe they are.
Yeah.
Do you think music actually gets its value from the person, not the actual music?
It gets its value from a bunch of people who feel something about the music, believing it has value.
Does that mean popularity makes the music important?
I think it adds to the story or the logic behind why that music should be valued more if it's been popular. Because it marks a point in time where a lot of people were agreeing that this thing was important. So therefore that has some sort of residual value.
That's a fact.
Right.
Where do you think you got your empathy from for creatives and culture?
I think that's entirely from my parents and hanging out with artists like throughout all different points of my life. And when I talk about artists, I mean like writers, whether they're visual artists, musicians, like anybody whose creative work doesn't have a logical service that you can assess an hourly rate to.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the soft skill kind of vibe, I guess.
You're paying for feelings in some way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and not to simplify it to that level, but
I feel like we need feelings though, right? Like if not, we just kind of end up on this very robotic scale as human. And I really wonder sometimes when the world kind of goes into this space of like, oh, you don't need to pay artists a certain kind of money or et cetera, et cetera. Like what would happen if you didn't have music? What would happen if you didn't have art?
My first reaction to that is like, that'll never happen, because artists, most of the artists I know and have worked with, like they're gonna art no matter what.
That's a fact.
Right. It's just part of their self-expression, the way they interact with the world. They need to make things because that's just a part of their brain. They have to like take out that thought and make it into something that that's tangible,
right?
And that other people can also experience. So I don't think there's ever a situation where just because there's no business model, art cannot exist.
Do you think artists naturally want to release to the public?
It depends on their personality, I think, and how maybe the phase of life, how self-conscious, self-aware they are, and what kind of energy they need back from the people that they want to make feel something.
Yeah.
Right. There is an aspect of like great art that comes from the exchange of energy between the audience and the artist, and sometimes it takes several cycles to get there. Like live performance is entirely that. Right?
Yeah.
You need that energy back to be at your best in a live performance. Every person, I think, has a level of validation that they need from someone outside of themselves. Maybe we should start the story like of how you and I met.
Yeah.
Which is like within the context of like NFTs and me being super curious about NFTs, especially music NFTs in 2021. Just looking around to see the landscape of like who are the artists out there who are putting out music NFTs. The music industry has always been terrible. It's a known fact.
Right.
And this seemed like a way for artists to take control of how they're going to make a living doing that art.
What was the win for you personally, though, out of collecting art in the Web3 space? And it could be totally selfish, and I'm respecting a selfish answer.
Honestly, I felt like it was a way to support that artist. And I mean support in the most sort of like wholesome sense of like, showing up at their shows, buying their merch, like the classic ways of like the way a fan shows up for the artist. I felt like, here, like Latashá an artist I found on Spotify like a year ago. I think they're amazing. Here's like the most expensive piece of merch I've ever seen in some sense. But I can totally justify in my head why it makes sense to support this. And it's going to feel good to me to know that I'm part of what makes it make sense financially to you to have made that video.
Word.
And I think, like the literal line of thinking that went on in my head is like, love this video. I don't know, it probably cost a few $1,000s to make, and I think at the time the ETH that was being asked for was like equating to a couple $1,000s. I was like, this totally makes sense. Like at the very least, I'm making Latashá whole on the production costs of this piece of art.
Yeah.
Right. And that felt good because it felt right.
Yeah, word. I don't know if you know this, but at the time when we shot that music video was COVID, and the label that we were working with on the song they were like, yeah, you should shoot a music video. And they were pushing for us to shoot a music video. And so we shot it because, Ja and the family all shoot here.
Yeah.
And like the cost was around like $10K or something like that to get it done. And we told the label like, hey, we're going to need some finances for it. They give us $500.
Yeah, what a joke. What a joke.
And so getting into Web3 and like having support like you guys, like the collectors that were coming in, you guys don't know like the value exchange that you guys were offering to us really just affirmed what we were doing. I really believe that like the purchase of that music video was like a life-altering thing for all of us, especially in the Lighthouse crew and for a lot of artists that were watching, because we put so much, especially the independent artists, put so much into creating their music videos, from down to like they're their own creative director, their stylist, everything they're doing by themselves, And so that moment was like a catapult moment for a lot of us. Yeah. Do you feel like you're kind of also playing a mentor?
Not intentionally. I do feel like I'm like one of the old guys in the space, and I'm like proud of that because I've seen some shit.
Yeah,
I've seen some things that are cycles that when you're in that cycle for the first time, seems like what the fuck is going on. But you talk to anybody who's been through a couple of cycles. Maybe the magic number is like 3. You've been through 3 cycles. You're like, okay, it's a wave. I just got to ride this wave out, or I've got to like just kind of understand that there's a pendulum swinging, and like shit might seem like super terrible now, but at some point it reindexes and going to float the other way.
How long is a cycle?
I mean, it depends on what we're talking about, right? Like it took the internet like to go from like, what is this shit, to my God, this is cringe. Like it was like, I don't know, like 20 years.
Do you think art is in cycles?
Generationally, we are all traveling in cycles, and the art you make as a angry teenager is going to be different from the art you make as a mom or a dad, right? But that's perpetual, right? People, and I think that's the beautiful thing about humans who make art over the course of their life is these are artifacts of their existence that they can refer to and other people can refer to see the growth of that individual human.
I'm in my 30s now, and I feel like when people see me, they do not know I'm in my 30s. So it's always like an interesting question, because I feel like I'm watching a cycle happen right now of the art, and like, I'm like, this is shit I cared about in 2010, Right. And I really do agree with this sentiment of the wave. And like, I'm kind of excited for it because I'm like, cool, now I could just bring back all the shit I did in 2010 and bring it back now.
Yeah.
And people will love it.
Every creative aspires to make something that's super durable. But the fact of the matter is, like, stuff just dies after some time. Like, every trend dies out. So,
or it comes back in
it
another
does come
cycle.
back. Yeah, it gets reborn, but it has to die.
Right. How do you feel about your title as an executive producer to so many projects coming out right now?
Like, most of us know executive producer as, that thing that shows up at the end of a movie where it's like executive produced by somebody. Or Law and Order. Like, every episode is like executive produced by Dick Wolf. Like, who the fuck is Dick Wolf and what did he actually do? I don't know, but he keeps showing up. I guess that's dope. It's a title that is identifiable, but no one knows what the heck it is. And that's kind of magical. We can craft it into whatever we want it to be.
Most musicians are now content creators, filmmakers, now creative directors, and like take on so many different roles than beyond the musician, right? And to have an executive producer a part of that is like now seeing the musician as a like studio in themselves, know?
Yeah. I think a huge part of like what we're all struggling to get our heads around and overcome, if we've seen art since the era of like shrink wrap CDs and vinyl, we've been missing the whole picture of like, how did that thing get made?
Right.
Like, where did it go from an idea into a bunch of people getting together in a studio and deciding that, this was what they were going to make. And like, then the whole thing had to come together, and there's like funding behind it. Like, the behind the scenes sort of like what happened in the factory view has never been apparent until maybe the last decade.
That's facts.
And so to the degree that people understand, in order to see this thing, it had to be made. And, making things, sure, it's fun, but it's actually it's also not free. Realizing that that's part of the mechanic of getting things you want made, and realizing that the skill set isn't just being a great singer or a great instrumentalist, but it's like knowing all this other context. Slow motion redefining what it means to be a creative. And redefining, I mean like people's presumptions.
What's the definition you want to see for the future of artists and patron models?
I mean, this might sound a little corny and kumbaya, but I think I want everyone to see each other as artists, and then realizing I can be a part of making that culture happen that I want to see, and not rely on my, clicks or my ad dollars or whatever making it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, we're all supporting each other because we all care about the culture that's getting made, and that's sort of the glue that holds the scene together.
Do you think that the future is going to have to rely on executive producers and patrons?
Yeah. People who understand art and artists and want more of that stuff are very deliberate, and there's conversations that they know they can have with the artists that they care about to fund more stuff to get made.
Yeah, word. That's it.